Welcome into another episode of Locked On Phillies. And in today's episode, I'm going to tell you why I think the Philadelphia Phillies very well could have their best rotation in franchise history this year on the mound.
You are Locked On Phillies, your daily Philadelphia Phillies podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, this is Locked On Phillies. I'm your host, Connor Thomas. Thank you so much for joining us today. We come to you as part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. You may know me from some of my other work in the sports talk space. I've been on air over at 97.5 The Fanatic on the radio, doing sports talk here in Philadelphia for 5 years. I've been a credentialed Philadelphia Phillies media member for 3 seasons, and this is my 4th year as the host of Locked On Phillies. Please make sure that you're rating and reviewing if you're listening to us in podcast form. If you're watching on the YouTube, go to Locked On Phillies YouTube channel and hit that subscribe button. It will get you notifications when new episodes are posted. It's a great way to keep up with all of our content so you don't miss any of the big Philadelphia Phillies news. And also, it's a great way to help me out as well. It's a nice thank you for the content if you enjoy what we do here on Locked On Phillies. So I appreciate everyone who's done that and everyone who's going to do that in the future. Now, in today's show, we're going to start with a conversation about the rotation. Are they the best in franchise history? Now, it's early to say definitively, but I'm going to state the case why I think they're going to be. Next up, as good as the rotation is, I have some questions about the bullpen. So I'm going to run through the what I'm terming bullpen trust meter and just kind of basically let you know where I'm at as far as that unit is concerned. There's some major upsides and there's some potential downsides. And then we're going to wrap up with a look at a training camp update just from what's going on down there and when we may see camp begin to thin out a little bit. We know how it goes. Normally, as you get a little bit closer to opening day, you start to see guys sent down to minor league camp. So we will discuss that later on. But let's start with this rotation question because this is going to be a hot take potentially, but I firmly stand by this, and I'm going to stand by this for the year. Right? Like, I don't know how this Philadelphia Phillies rotation is truly going to look when everything's all said and done. It's too early, and spring training, I've cautioned you multiple times, hey, don't jump the gun on anything you're seeing down in spring training. But what I'm talking about in this episode is not based on what's happened in 2025 spring training. Like, there's a little bit that does influence it, but no, this is mostly the qualities of careers. Like, let's look at who the Philadelphia Phillies have in their rotation. First of all, you have Zach Wheeler, who is arguably the best pitcher on planet Earth right now. Like, there's a chance that there may be nobody better, right? That's probably the first time the Philadelphia Phillies can make that argument since Roy Halladay was a member of this team. That was a while ago. So that's the guy leading the rotation. He's going to eat up innings. He's got everything you want a power pitcher to have. He goes about his business. He takes care of it. Second, Aaron Nola, the homegrown kid. The guy that, well, homegrown as far as the system. He's from New Orleans, Louisiana. But whatever the case may be, or maybe he's not from New Orleans proper, but he's from Louisiana. He came up in the Phillies system. He is heading into what I believe is his 11th year? 10th or 11th year at the major league level. Yeah, I know. Time flies with Aaron Nola. He's gotten Cy Young votes multiple times in 2018. He was one of the favorites to win the award. He is as durable as any pitcher in baseball. He's going to give you 30-plus starts every single year. He's unbelievable. Plus, he takes care of business in the postseason, much like Zach Wheeler does. The guy has been great. He is a one on probably, 10, 12 teams in baseball right now. He would be their best pitcher. And Zach Wheeler would be the best pitcher on maybe 25 of the teams in baseball right now. Like, yeah, they're that good. And then you're going to follow that up with guys like Christopher Sanchez, who got a Cy Young vote last year, who's added velocity, whose changeup is the best changeup in baseball, who just got signed to a long-term deal to lock him down before you have to worry about him making ridiculous money because the Phillies think he's going to. Handles his business, goes about it, has been a great worker in the Philadelphia Phillies clubhouse, and really balances out the rotation very well. He's one of the biggest up-and-coming pitching stars in baseball. And another one of those guys, now a little bit further on the line, is Ranger Suarez. Now, I say further because he's kind of been part of the Phillies conversation a little bit longer than Sanchez. We've known that Ranger Suarez has had plus stuff. The first 3 months of last year's season, Ranger Suarez was the best pitcher on planet Earth, right? That includes Zach Wheeler. He was the guy. He was better than anybody else in the National League. He was better than arguably anybody else in baseball. The problem with Ranger Suarez is going to be durability, and that's obviously a major concern. You can't just write that off. But I'm talking about talent level of the rotation. Any of these guys could receive Cy Young votes this year. Any of those four. And then, by the way, you have the newcomer. You have Jesus Luzardo, who's been throwing absolute cheddar off the bump down there in spring training this year, that brings in this younger presence slightly to a rotation that has a couple of veterans that are signed long-term. Those middle guys in Sanchez and Suarez, who are trying to figure out exactly who they're going to be as plus major league pitchers. Not major league pitchers. No, they know they're very good. But are they going to be elite? Are either of them going to develop into a one? Are you going to have three guys that can masquerade as ones on this team? Maybe more with Ranger Suarez and what he could do in a contract year, mind you. And then Jesus Luzardo is getting his first taste of, okay, this is what it feels like to play and pitch for a competitive team after being acquired from the Miami Marlins. He's got really good stuff that's going to play incredibly out of the fifth spot in this rotation if he indeed is in the fifth spot in the rotation. Like, they have everything you could hope for in a rotation and more. And that's why I think that this is going to be the best rotation in franchise history. Now, I'm saying in a single season, right? I'm not comparing the overall quality of these players' careers to guys like Roy Halladay, Roy Oswalt, Cliff Lee, guys like that were on that team. Like they're Cole Hamels on that team as well. Joe Blanton was their fifth starter. Like, no, I'm not comparing their, because Roy Halladay's a lock Hall of Famer, obviously, already inducted. Some of those other guys on that team are like, okay, you're talking Hall of Fame or fringe Hall of Fame for a good number of those guys. We'll see how this plays out because for a couple, it's too early in their career to tell. Sanchez, Suarez, Luzardo. But as far as individual talent paired together in a rotation, looking at a single season with all the contributing factors, this is the best rotation the Philadelphia Phillies have ever had. It is. You can look back all those days. You can go to the 2000s, 90s, 80s, 70s, keep on going back. They've never had a rotation like this. That's why I have so much faith in the Philadelphia Phillies again this year after they run it back offensively, because their rotation is going to be impossible to deal with, like impossible. Outside of a super team like the Dodgers, I don't know who exists out there that can consistently create offense against this rotation. Now, we're going to talk about the bullpen next, and this is not the Phillies are going to shut everybody out. They won't have to score more than one run in any game all year. Like, no, the bullpen's going to have to throw. You're going to have to stretch guys out. They're not always going to have great starts over the course of the season. There will be guys that get injured. There will be guys that will have to step up, i.e. Andrew Painter, that will have to hold the rope when these guys go down for a week or two. Hopefully not any more than that. But I look at it and I say, okay, the four aces back in 2011, like, incredible, right? I still have a t-shirt. Like, they were making shirts and headlines and everything in between with Halladay, Hamels, Oswalt, Lee, and Blanton, right? And the four aces obviously did not include Joe Blanton. That would be like throwing Taijuan Walker on the backside of this thing. But they don't. They have another guy. They have Jesus Luzardo, who could be a plus major league pitcher when he's at his best. You got 5+ major league guys with 4 of them potential Cy Young vote getters. How are you supposed to look at that and be worried about a baseball team? Like, I understand the trouble with the offensive approach come postseason. I get it, right? When you get to the postseason, dudes are going to have to hit. And I'm not saying anything about this team is winning a World Series because of this rotation. Like, when they do find their way to a World Series, if they do find their way to a World Series this year, it's largely going to be because of the pitching staff, right? The offense will have to do their part. But the calling card of this team, I think, is going to be their pitching staff because they're just so darn good. And I just look at it and I say, okay, it would be like if a team had, a basketball team had Shaq, prime Shaq, and you say, well, they can't shoot the three. like, yeah, okay, they're going to have to figure out how to get some buckets outside of the paint. But look at this monster you have on the inside. That's what the Phillies are with this rotation. Like, I can't think of any other team in franchise history, as long as I've been studying the Phillies, talking Phillies, watching Phillies, anything like that. Before I was watching Phillies, when you go back into the annals of Philadelphia Phillies history, I can't even come up with a rotation that mirrors the power that this one's going to have. So, yeah, this is going to be special, folks. I want you to be ready for it. I want you to be zoned in on the Philadelphia Phillies pitching staff, because you're going to see special after special after special performance. I don't know if they're going to throw no hitters. I don't know if they're going to throw perfect games. I don't know if they're going to throw complete game shutouts. But I know that the calling card of this team, when everything's all said and done, is going to be how great this pitching staff is. And that, honestly, that should give you a lot of faith in this team's ceiling. It should. Like, I don't know how anyone competes with this besides the Dodgers. And you could say that about any unit on any team anywhere. The Dodgers are going to be in the conversation because they've just got everybody. But the Phillies have something special cooking when it comes to the rotation. All five guys are awesome. Their sixth guy in Andrew Painter, I expect to be awesome when he is called upon at some point later on in the season. Yeah, remember, when we're in June or July and we're starting to hear the numbers like we did last year about how this team is doing stuff that even that 2010 and 11 grouping of pitchers never did for the Philadelphia Phillies. Remember, one, they did that last year with Taijuan Walker, dragging him along, and Spencer Turnbull, who was good, very good early on in the season, but was not a true pitcher the way that Jesus Luzardo is. Like, he's a nice piece. He's not a true plus starter like I believe Luzardo can be on this team, and was at some points down in Miami. And remember where you heard it first, that you heard on Locked On Phillies, that the best rotation in Phillies franchise history is one that was created by Dave Dombrowski this offseason with the trade for Jesus Luzardo. Coming up next, we're going to take a little bit of a different approach to the bullpen conversation, because as good as I feel about the rotation, and as sure as I am that that's going to be the case, or at least close to the case, I don't know what in the world's going on with the bullpen. Like, not in a bad way, just an unknown way. There's a lot of weird pieces. So I'm going to break down kind of why I think it's a weird spot. And I'm also going to discuss the bullpen trust meter, where I'm at with different players, different parts, different roles, and the bullpen as a whole. We'll talk about it coming up as we continue today's episode of Locked On Phillies. Let's talk about wonderful pistachios first, because if you're looking for a snack that's both delicious and nutritious, you can crack into a good source of protein with wonderful pistachios. Now, I have this bag here, if you're watching on the YouTube, with the no shells version, sea salt and vinegar flavored. And if you listen, yeah, it's empty, because I crushed all of them within 2 days of buying that, because I could not stop eating them. I never can when I get them. Every once in a while, I will get them as a snack as I try and get into better shape for summer. I'm going to have to add them into the rotation more, because wonderful pistachios are one of the highest protein nuts. Each 1 ounce serving has 6 grams of protein, giving you over 10% of your daily value. Plus, they're packed with fiber and better for you unsaturated fats to help keep you feeling fuller longer. So, like I said, I like the no shells version. You can get the OG pistachios with the shells through Wonderful Pistachios. They got different flavors and those different seasonings on them. They got everything you need. They're really easy grab and go snacks, especially now that the weather's getting warmer. You're trying to stay in shape. They're good for you. They're easy. They taste great. What more do you want? Get snackin' and get crackin' with a snack that packs a protein punch. Visit wonderfulpistachios.com to learn more. So the bullpen is in an interesting spot for the Philadelphia Phillies. Now, if you watched yesterday's episode, you definitely saw my roster projection. And Michael Mercado is the guy that I had in the final spot in the Philadelphia Phillies bullpen. And part of that is just familiarity, right? I don't know. It's weird how they're going to handle that final spot. We had a conversation about, could it be Taijuan Walker? I don't think that's happening. But the buzz is starting to grow a little bit on, it could be Taijuan Walker. It could be him filling in the final spot in the bullpen. I still don't think so. Just a little update, by the way. I'm going to talk tonight with Jason Stark. Obviously, Jason Stark, Baseball Hall of Famer, as a writer. We're going to have him on air, 97.5 The Fanatic, I'm doing a show with Ricky Batalico, of course, former Phillies reliever, current coworker of mine over at 97.5 The Fanatic. You see him on Phillies pre- and post-game on NBC Sports Philadelphia. So Ricky and I are going to interview Jason Stark later and have a nice little discussion with him. I'm going to report back, obviously, with what Jason has to say to me on the air over there. So we'll do that in our next episode as well. But in lieu of that, today we're going to take a shot at this bullpen situation. And then I'm going to ask him some questions about it tonight and get a little bit more of a breakdown for you. But just so you know where my brain is at. So Mercado, who knows? Walker, who knows? I don't know who gets that 8th spot. Right now, I feel like it won't be Taijuan Walker. Could be another one of those minor league guys that makes a late push ahead, depending on what the Phillies need. But here are the 7 guys that we do know are going to be in the Philadelphia Phillies bullpen. You got the newcomers, Joe Ross, Jordan Romano. You have the newish guy in Tanner Banks, who was here last year, but you didn't really see a lot of him last year. So those are 3 of the 7. And then you have the main 4 holdovers, Matt Strahm, Jose Ruiz, Jose Alvarado, and Orion Kerkering. So we've seen those guys for a couple of years here in the Philadelphia Phillies bullpen. You know them. You feel relatively comfortable with them. And those are probably the guys that I'm most comfortable with. But let's think about it, right? Let's look at where all these guys kind of break down. Let's do handedness first, because a lot of relievers are brought into games based on handedness matchup. Lefty to face a righty, righty to face a lefty. It's the same reason that rule exists, where you have to face 3 batters. And you can't just go righty facing lefty, or sorry, righty, righty, lefty, lefty, I should say. You're not going to bring in a righty to face a lefty, obviously. Just misspoke. Doing a lot of content before I go on vacation to Florida. But the point is, most of bullpen decisions are made based on handedness. So when you look at the lefties, how do you feel about that whole setup? Well, you've got Matt Strahm, and you've got Jose Alvarado, and you've got Tanner Banks. And I look at those guys who are going to be your main lefty relievers, and I say, okay, Strahm's probably your best overall reliever. He was an all-star last year. He was a monster. Feel pretty good about that. Jose Alvarado, when he's good, he's good. When he's bad, he's bad. Like, he has an incredibly high ceiling. The ceiling he has is as like a top 3 to 5 lefty reliever in baseball. There are very few guys that can say that. Matt Strahm may be one of them. But Jose Alvarado's stuff is unbelievable. But when he's bad, he walks the park. He can't control anything. He doesn't have to give up contact because he can't spot well enough to allow it. And that's a tough spot to be. He had both of those options in 2024, realized, where he had moments where he wasn't very good and a lot of people questioned him. And then he figured it out in like the final month or so and looked significantly better. So I don't know. We'll see how that all plays out as far as that's concerned. But he has high upside, right? Jose Alvarado, we know how to deal with that as Phillies fans. Tanner Banks, he's more of a lefty specialist. He's more of like a 5th, 6th, 7th inning guy. Not going to be a high leverage guy. Can get the job done as far as that's concerned. So you feel pretty good about that. And I mean, I don't know exactly what the lower side of the lefties is going to be. Like, I don't know what you're looking at as far as that's concerned. But the upside of lefty relievers in the Phillies bullpen is pretty good. Righties, it's a little bit different. Okay, so your best righty reliever is probably, see, this is tough. Do I say it's Orion Kerkering? This is what I'm struggling with right now. Is Orion Kerkering ready to be considered this top-tier right-handed reliever in just like his 2nd full year at the major league level? He could be. Now, Jordan Romano is also a right-handed, and he's probably going to have the closer role. So it's between those 2 guys, and I'll give the nod to Romano based on tenure. But high ceiling with Romano, not really sure what you're getting. Very similar to what we're talking about with Alvarado. Now, not the same stuff, but like, could be great, could have injury issues. Not sure. Orion Kerkering, probably going to have a really darn good year. More Matt Strahm than Jose Alvarado. So I'd say he's your most consistent best righty. Matt Strahm is your most consistent best lefty. Jose Alvarado is your flamethrower. Jordan Romano is your like closer guy, right side. So you have those two guys matching up. And then you've got to look at guys like Jose Ruiz and take an idea of what he's going to be from last year. Like Jose Ruiz may be the linchpin of this whole bullpen, depending on who the final guy is in the bullpen, because he had a really good year last year. And that was part of the reason I think the Phillies were comfortable with moving on from Jeff Hoffman and from Carlos Estevez, because Ruiz had such a nice year as a mid-level reliever for this team. If he does that again, the bullpen's going to be solid. But if he doesn't, well, Joe Ross is a swing man who's more comfortable being a starter than a reliever. He can be a reliever. He had a sub 1.5 ERA in like 20-some innings as a reliever for the Milwaukee Brewers last year, the back half of the season. So with that in mind, like there's major upside there as well. But again, he's in a different type of role coming into this season than he was. Like he'll be a swing guy if they need someone to go into the rotation and be a starter at some point, but he's on this team to be a reliever. And if guys stay healthy in the rotation, that's what he's going to be. And can he fully embrace that role? We'll have to see. Like the question marks surrounding Joe Ross and his role, Jordan Romano and his health, Alvarado and the season last year, what do you make of it? Was he good? Was he bad? I don't know. It was a little bit of both. Orion Kirkering and his continued growth into a star pitcher. Jose Ruiz and trying to build upon a year where it was kind of his breakout year as a reliever. Tanner Banks, lefty specialist. Can he be more than that? Matt Strahm, can he follow up on an all-star season? He was incredibly close with Jeff Hoffman. They were throwing partners. They bounced a lot of stuff off of each other. How does he echo an all-star season without the guy that he gave a lot of credit to for helping each other become those all-star level talents? Like there's all of these guys in the pen that you look at and say, yeah, there's upside, but there's also question marks. Like there is no question mark about Zach Wheeler. There is no question mark about Aaron Nola. Right? There's very few question marks about Christopher Sanchez. And Ranger Suarez, who has the most question marks in the rotation, is in a contract year. So he's going to be motivated to perform. The bullpen on the other side, what my trust is at, man, it's so hard to say. Like, I just think more about a ranking, honestly, of where they stand in baseball right now. And for me, they're top 10, maybe top 8 as far as bullpen units in Major League Baseball. They're in the top third of the league with a ceiling as a top 5, maybe even top 3 bullpen. But that's going to be a tough ceiling to reach considering that there are all these question marks. So I think they've got a top 10 bullpen, which is not a bad place to be. But last year, they had one of the top 5 bullpens in baseball. And even then, they absolutely soiled themselves in the biggest series of the year against the Mets. And they're, to me, the reason the Philadelphia Phillies went home is because the bullpen had nobody that could go out there and get you outs in the postseason. We'll see if that's the case again this year. I hope it's not. But as far as my trust level in the bullpen, it's all right now. Top third in Major League Baseball, which I'm used to seeing after last year, something better than that. And if the Phillies bullpen takes a step back, even more will go on the plate of the starters, who we talked about to start the episode. The good news is I think the starters are going to be the best starting 5 in Philadelphia Phillies franchise history. So they can carry their own weight. Maybe that uplifts the bullpen even more, right? Here's what we're going to do. So I'm going to reset this again in the final segment, but we're going to do an off the poll question for our next episode. And it's going to be based on the bullpen trust meter. So I'm going to come up with a couple of options, how you evaluate the Philadelphia Phillies bullpen. Like, do you think they're elite, top 5 in baseball? Do you think they're great, top 10 in baseball? Do you think they're a question mark, somewhere in the middle, not sure? Or do you think they're going to underperform, bottom half of the league as far as the bullpen's concerned? And I want to see how people break that down and answer. So I'll post that poll on Twitter and get that out, and you'll be able to respond for it. And we'll go through those responses on our next episode. So how about that? We'll get your taste on the bullpen trust meter. Clearly, I have questions. I have beliefs in the upside, but there are not many other parts of this team where it's just like, I don't know what this guy's going to be, and I don't know what the issues could be. Like, the bullpen is going to be the X factor of this team. We know how the team handles their at-bats is going to be the most important thing. We know the pitching staff, the rotation, I should say, is going to be the best thing. And then the bullpen is kind of that weird X factor. It's like, are you going to win us games or lose us games? More often than not, I hope they win us games, and there's talent there, but I don't know. We will see. So I'll get your thoughts on that for an off the poll segment for tomorrow's episode. Wrapping up today's episode, I'm just going to give you a quick training camp update because there's an interesting new factor in play for Philadelphia Phillies camp attendees, not fans, players. And I'll tell you what that is next as we wrap up today's episode. All right, so the Phillies, as they roll into the early part of their March training camp schedule, remember, opening day on the 27th. Today is the 4th. So by my math, that is 23 days until we play meaningful baseball. It is right around the corner, folks. Buckle up for a marathon of a season. And with that, you start to think about minor league camp. So the Philadelphia Phillies have opened up their minor league camp as of Tuesday of this week down at the Carpenter Complex down there in Clearwater. So with the opening of minor league camp, what that means is the Phillies will now be looking to remove people from major league camp. Now, this is not like the NFL, right? Remember, in the NFL with training camp, you have all these guys, and then you have cut down day, and you'll have like 8 players released. And those players will potentially go on your practice squad or potentially be picked up by other teams around the NFL. That's not what getting put out of major league spring training is like. It just moves you down to the minor league camp, right? What it does for most of these guys is just says, okay, you're going to go work on stuff down here. We're going to work on more major league specific stuff here at our camp and get ready for the season. You're not going to make the team, but you're going to literally be right down the road and be in a situation where, okay, you can work with coaches, some of the same coaches. You're going to work with our staff. We're going to get you spring training ready for minor league stuff. You're going to bring in new players who are minor league arms to go ahead and get some work in as well ahead of AAA, AA, single A seasons. But basically all it is you didn't make the team. Give us the room to work on what we need to work on. So what comes as a byproduct of cutting down the number of guys you have in camp is, one, we're going to start to get ideas of who's in position to make the team. Now, you're not going to see any of those contending players. Like the big 4 that we've talked about for the Phillies outfield depth, or I guess position player depth, have been Weston Wilson, who's currently hurt, Buddy Kennedy, Cal Stevenson, and also Cody Clemens. Like, you're not going to see any of those guys go to minor league camp, right? At least not now. Maybe on like the 22nd or something of March, you'll see that start to happen. But these are guys, it's just like dudes you've never heard of before that are extra arms, extra catchers, whatever. Probably guys like Justin Crawford and Aiden Miller are going to be in a situation where they end up there sooner rather than later because they're not making the team. But you wanted to give them some experience of like what Major League Camp was like and going through that for a couple of weeks and everything. So this will also give us a clearer picture of what the lineup's going to look like because you're going to have less guys to supplement the actual Major League players. So it won't be like 5 Major League players spread throughout the lineup and then 4 guys you never heard of or 4 guys that are AA or AAA guys. Like, no, when those guys start going to minor league camp, you're going to start to put together more of a full lineup together. You're going to see less innings from players that you'll never watch at the major league level. You'll see more from the current bullpen. It'll give us a better idea of what's going on with the bullpen. So it'll give more information because you'll get more playing time out of the players that are actually going to make the 26-man opening day roster. So with minor league camp open, it now allows them to, it basically is like you're waiting for daycare to open. While daycare's on an hour delay or whatever, parents know how it goes with snow days like that this time of year. Now, baseball and snow days, that doesn't normally mix, and hopefully we're over that now that we're into March. I'm thinking warm weather right now in my mind. But you got to watch the kids for a little bit at home and take care of them, get it done, and then daycare opens and you say, okay, now I can focus on what I have to do for work. Go ahead and they'll keep an eye on you. That's kind of what the opening of minor league camp is like. So we'll keep an eye on some of the names that are sent there and what that tells us about what the roster could look like come March 27th. So that's another sign. We're just getting closer and closer to opening day baseball. We have also something special that we're going to be doing next week on the Locked On Podcast Network that I'll tell you about on tomorrow's episode. So you're going to want to tune in for that. But that's all for today's episode. Thank you so much for joining us. We come to you as part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Again, please make sure that you're rating, reviewing, subscribing to the YouTube, all that great stuff that really helps us out here on Locked On Phillies. Tomorrow, we'll have the off the poll responses from that question about the bullpen trust meter. We will discuss what I talk about with Jason Stark, MLB Hall of Fame writer, and we're also going to have some other just general good stuff for you from the latest from spring training. But that's all for today's episode, so I will talk to you tomorrow on the next episode of Locked On Phillies.